What is something a high school teacher told you, that you will never forget? I had an English teacher my freshman year of high school who was one of the rare adults that treated all of his students with respect while at the same time challenging us to do better. I distinctly remember him telling our class, "You are not as mature as you think you are, but you are more mature than your parents give you credit for." He also told us about an agreement/rule he had with his own kids. He understood how hard it was for kids to do the right thing in the face of peer pressure. So he had told his kids that if they were ever in a situation, underage drinking, drugs, whatever, where they knew they shouldn't be, they could call and using an previously agreed upon code word that was banal and unsuspicious, he would know he needed to go get them and be the bad guy. He would show up, Uncle Buck style, and get them out of wherever they were. This would allow them to save face with their friends and there would be no consequences for being the situation in the first place. Class camp, we're out walking a trail to the next campsite, carrying our lives in our packs. I was not in great physical shape and was well back in the rear. So it's basically just me and one teacher to make sure no one fell too far back. We came to a part where a branch had fallen across the trail. Big enough to be an effort to move it, but not so large that it couldn't have been moved by any of the 30 and other students and teachers that had already walked around it. Without even thinking about it, I grabbed the branch and tossed it to the side of the path. The teacher said to me, 30 boys walked past that branch. It took one man to move it, and he made life easier for every person after him. It became a personal motto, of sorts, make it easier for the people who come after you. Although when you do a good job, the person who comes after you is usually also you. In my childhood only one person ever tackled my mother about her abuse of me and my siblings. It was Parents' Day and my bitch of a mother, as usual, turned up to take the credit for my being top of the class again. At one point there was just me, my bitch of a mother, and Mrs. Soames, physics teacher, in the lab. Mrs. Soames quite calmly challenged her, saying, "Mrs. XXXXX, why do you treat Tom's daughter the way you do? She's a good girl and doesn't deserve it." To my astonishment, my evil bitch of a mother was speechless. No one had ever confronted her before and she just didn't know where to put herself. It was easy for the other teachers and pupils to make snide, patronizing remarks about this cow to me. A 13-year-old girl isn't in a position to do anything about it, and I'm guessing they were trying to ease their consciences about the fact that they were too cowardly to intervene. But Mrs. Soames has been a role model for me ever since, and an unforgettable example of those people brave enough to tackle a bully in the presence of their victim. To have someone stand by you when you are vulnerable, and make their support for you clear, I can't tell you how that changed my view of other people. On September 11th, while classes were all but cancelled, most teachers just rolled in TVs and left the news on. Not Jim R. He got up and lectured, to the groans of students. He talked about the effects this would have on the economy, our politics, our culture, and society. And he was right. In somewhat broad strokes, of course. But this was literally hours after the towers collapsed. When so much was still unknown, frightening and tragic. It really gave me what I would consider a solid base of understanding the things that would come in the next decade. He talked about how traveling would change with restrictive security measures, how politics would take advantage of terrorism, how the wars we will engage will be paid for by my generation, my kids' generation, and so on. He talked about how racism will spike toward Middle Eastern peoples out of anger and fear and how that is totally wrong. As a vet and former cop, he cautioned us to not join the military while emotions ran high and a sense of patriotism was thick in our veins. It was a gift. As the years went on, WMDs, the Iraq War, TSA, Department of Homeland Security all came about. I felt like I already knew. I will never forget that fourth period class. I was a senior and my boyfriend at the time was a junior. I had a part-time job at a restaurant and had formed a little crush on one of my co-workers who was a bit older than me. I knew it was unrealistic, but I couldn't help the way I felt. I confided in my APUSH teacher from the previous year who knew both me and my boyfriend. He said to me, "Everything that happens up there in your mind palace is harmless, you can think and feel however you want, and as long as you don't act on those feelings you're not doing anything wrong." That really grounded me. My boyfriend and I had one of the happiest, fruitful, and stable relationships I've ever been a part of. Although we broke up when I left for college, we're still good friends. Shortly after this conversation, my work crush evolved into an amazing friendship and he started dating one of our co-workers who became one of my best friends. They're slightly older than me, so I look up to them and joke that they're my parents. They're still the only three people I try and see every time I'm in my hometown, smiley face. I went to 13 years of Catholic school. My dad was agnostic, but my mom was from a large Catholic family, even though she wasn't particularly devout herself. I was an altar boy, went through the relevant sacraments, earned the Cub Scout and Boy Scout medals for Catholicism, and all that jazz, even though I didn't particularly have strong feelings one way or the other. It's just what everyone I knew did. In order to graduate, every student had to have an exit interview with the school priest to discuss your future as an adult in the church. I walked in for my, and Father T just stared at me for a minute, and then said, "Enrith, let's be honest and not waste our time. We both know that you aren't really a believer and have no intention of continuing in the faith when you leave." I was shocked. I had never said a word to anyone that would indicate this, I just never really gave it much thought. I pointed out that I'd done all the things that had been expected of me. I was a good kid, didn't drink, didn't fornicate, hell, I didn't even take the Lord's name in vain at that point. I asked him why on earth he would say that about me. He said he just had a hunch, and was he wrong? I thought about, decided he was right, and never looked back. So I have a priest to thank for showing me that not only had I lost my faith, but that I may have never had any to begin with. Our physics teacher used to give us tricky questions after explaining concepts to get us used to solving them. In one of the questions I found his answer to be wrong and corrected him. He listened to me but couldn't find where he went wrong. It turned into a debate with each of us trying to convince the other. Every time I tried to convince him I had the lingering doubt, what if I'm wrong? What if I made some careless stupid mistake which gave me the wrong answer? The only reason I still had the courage to hold my own view was the teacher himself. He never dismissed my question, never treated me like an ignorant kid questioning his teacher who knew better. By the end we had run out of time as the class had ended. Most of my classmates were either trying to convince me he was right by quoting his initial explanation verbatim or expecting me to be proven wrong. Even if I was right, I was expecting him to either ignore my question or to skip past it. But in the next class he not only told the class I was right, he explained where he went wrong in his initial explanation and turned it into a teaching moment where he showed us that anyone could make mistakes but wisdom lies in fixing them. He later told me that even if I were wrong, what I did was right, that I should never hesitate to question anything or anyone as long as I do it in a respectful and courteous way. That lesson never left me, and I just hope that whenever I question something, disagree with someone, or I am proven wrong, I can do it with enough grace and humility to make him proud. Our class was supposed to be reading 1984. One day I showed